These are some ColecoVision controllers which I've created for my ColecoVision compatible project. In the middle is the one that I've shown in the previous video, which is filament printed. So it's done in like as fast as I could print, just to get the test to see if the design files worked and fitted around the PCB which I'd created for the controller. And then at the end of that video I said how I was going to send off to China for some resin printed cases, because they are a lot higher quality cases. And in this video I'm going to discuss why, after uploading the design files to the Chinese website, I decided actually I wouldn't get them actually manufactured from the Chinese website. I'd buy a resin 3D printer myself and print them myself. But before I do that, I'll take a look at the actual controllers which I've printed myself at home. Now these are the first prints I've ever done on a resin 3D printer, so the quality isn't as high as it could be, but you get these such good quality that you can actually put writing on the actual 3D prints. Now I've made these letters, these numbers as big as the actual buttons, but you can create very small fine writing which actually you can it comes out very clearly. Now what I've done is I've actually printed it so that this surface was flat to the print bed, and when I printed the bottom of the case, that surface was flat to the print bed. I did that because I wanted to keep the number of layers as small as I could, but there's a penalty to doing that. What you're supposed to do is you're supposed to print it at an angle, and that way the surfaces all come out nice and clean, so that if you got, like I've got here writing on the top, that would come out okay. But because this was on the surface of the print bed, you actually have to bake the first couple of layers onto that by overexposing them to make sure that it sticks to the print bed. But like I say, in order to keep the actual time to print right down, I wanted the height to be as small as possible, because once you start slanting it, you're actually going to print what took, the top of this took about 48 minutes to print, but if I'd slanted it, it would take hours to print, even though you get much better quality. But this is really just as a test print, as a first print for my actual printer, and to get through the project so that I can actually hopefully get it up and running. I've used a couple of colours of resin in order to get a contrast between the buttons and the joystick controller knob and the actual case itself, so that actually when you look at it, it's not just all black and like it's not obvious where the buttons are. So that's it's quite good to be able to do that with the resin print as well. And like I was saying with the filament print, the actual tolerances, if you look at down at the end there where the controller is, it's incredible how on these 3D prints how tight you can get the tolerances for actually fitting cases and things. But even though these are my first prints and I've really done it in a kind of draft way, like I say, to cut down the printing time, the quality is just phenomenal compared to a filament printer, and you don't get the bowing as well along the edge. Here there's a bit of a blemish where I don't think when I printed the top I hadn't had the exposure times quite right. That's why it's come out a bit funny as well, whereas I increased the exposure times for the bottom and you can see it's a lot smoother. But I need to get those actual settings nailed down, so when I print other case items, hopefully they'll print a lot better. So here's some pages from the Chinese website where I was going to get the 3D prints done from, and the font's a bit small, but on the left there's a little thumbnail of the actual design file that I've uploaded. So I've uploaded everything in one single design file because I thought it would probably fit on their print bed, because they've got like massive industrial 3D printers. So I thought if I put it all in one, I could probably cut the cost of actually printing stuff rather than uploading individual parts and getting them each individually printed. And I've selected here the actual filament print, so for the ABS. So the ABS material that they've got is in filament. And on the right hand side you can see the price. So this is for a quantity of 4 controllers with the joystick knob and the buttons as well. And it's £73.14 for the actual print of the actual job. And then the shipping estimate just below at the bottom of that is £22.73. So around about £100, so a little bit under £25 per controller case, and that, like I say, includes the buttons and the joystick knob. And that's good value really. I mean, £25, if you would get just an ABS project case from a from like an online distributor, which was like a blank case which you'd have to drill and file and Dremel away at. It's going to cost about that for that size of case, and what you'd end up with is something which didn't look particularly good. It'd be functional, but here, if you get this 3D printed on this particular material, you're paying about the same kind of cost, but it's going to be really look good and laid out well. Because like I say, these are industrial machines, and they also know what they're doing, so it's going to look really good. But you've probably heard me say before, I'm cheap, so I'll go for the cheapest thing I can get. And the ABS filament print is a bit too expensive for me. And so I'll go to their resin options. I try and find the cheapest resin that's available, which is here. The other resin can get quite expensive as well, but the cheapest one's pretty good. It's £18.29. That's for the 4 controller cases, and they're all uploaded again as one item, and £22.73 shipping. So that comes to about £40. So that'd be about £10 per case, and that's really good value, and the quality is going to be amazing. So I actually tried to submit this as a job, and it came back saying you need to upload each of the parts individually. You can't just like put them on one bed. So it failed their like sanity check. So I thought, okay, well, it's probably going to be more expensive to do it that way, which is why I originally put them all in one file. But let's get a quote for that. So I uploaded all the parts individually, and as I thought, it was a bit more expensive. So it's basically £29 for the actual printing and £45.73 for the shipping. It went up a hell of a lot here. Although just before New Year, when I actually got the quote online then, and I was logged in, the shipping was actually a lot cheaper than that. But overall, the quote came to when I did it just before New Year, £50 for the job. So that's about £12.50 per case, and that's really good as well. And I would have done that, but I stopped and thought, well, actually, I've got a 3D filament printer which I got really cheap. When I bought it, it was like £60 brand new. I was wondering, if I look on eBay, how much are the resin printers now, because it's been a long time since they've been out. Maybe they've come down in price. And when I took a look, actually there was one for £106. So I thought, well, rather than send away to a Chinese place and get them printed, and this one's going to cost about £40–50 to do this job, and then I've got the actual computer case to do and ROM cartridge cases to do, and that's all going to add up, and actually it's going to come to more than the cost of a resin printer. So I thought, actually, why don't I just buy a resin printer, the one that's cheapest on eBay? I mean, it's not going to be the best one, but I don't need perfection. I just need, I mean, it gives, any resin printer is going to give high quality, so I'll try that. So here's the 3D printer I found on eBay, and just before New Year I purchased this. It was £106. Now actually I looked again after New Year, and it had gone up to £140 something, maybe £150. So it was not as cheap after New Year as it was before. But looking online on YouTube, because I've watched a few videos about this, and they describe it as a $99 3D printer. So actually it may come down in price again in future, I would think. It seems to probably go up and down in price as you go through the year. So it might be worth keeping an eye out if you are interested in a printer like this. However, you need to remember that there's a lot involved in resin 3D printing. So my filament 3D printer, I just leave it sitting there, and if I want a 3D print, I just turn it on and I can tell it to 3D print something, and that's no problem at all, and you just have to replace the filament when the filament runs out. But with resin 3D printers, you need a spare room, because the actual fumes that come off it are absolutely horrendous, and it needs to be a room you can ventilate easily so you can get rid of the fumes. But that means you need breathing equipment, so you need like a breathing mask, and you need isopropyl alcohol to clean off the prints afterwards, and you need a way to cure them as well. You need some kind of UV light source to cure them after you've actually got them off the printer, so they come off kind of tacky. And then you need to just expose them to UV light to finally cure them. Now some people do that out in sunlight. I'm not going to go through in this video here how to actually do resin 3D printing. It's quite an involved process, and there's lots of videos online where you can actually go and see how other people that have been doing it for years are doing it. But it's not just a simple buy a 3D printer and print. There's a lot more involved in resin 3D printers, so unless you're really committed, I would actually go recommend going to the Chinese websites and getting stuff printed there, but I like to do things at home, and I like to do things cheaply, and if I can do them myself, then I'll do them myself. So to get an idea of the kind of quality you can get out of this 3D printer, I've printed off a couple of test prints which you can download. You can get various types of test print, and it shows the kind of definition you can get and the kind of small writing you can do. So this is the resin I've been using, and like everything I do, I try to get as cheap as I can, so this is the cheapest I could find on eBay. And as you can see, it's solid black, and it's ABS like, so it has the properties of a kind of an ABS type of material where you can actually screw self-tapping screws into them, whereas I think the other types of resin, they may be more brittle and probably wouldn't be able to take a screw being screwed into it. But on the side of on the label, it tells you about all the settings you need for your printer, and these are kind of rough settings, and you need to really mess around with them a bit to find out for your printer exactly what the best settings are, because printers vary from printer to printer, and depends on how you have the polythene sheet in the actual tank of resin, that might affect things as well, and the temperature and all kinds of things. So this resin cost about £19 per kilogram from eBay, and they do all kinds of colours and all kinds of materials as well.